Am I good enough? I'm talking to a friend about Christianity. He says, I often think I'm not good enough. I find it hard calling myself a Christian. I try to reassure. I tell him how I have found him so caring and full of kindness. He replies, but I'm still not good enough. I'm talking to another friend. She also tells me she is not good enough. She says her prayer life is rubbish and that deep in her heart, she just thinks she is not good enough. Have you ever wondered if you're good enough to follow Jesus or good enough to actually call yourself a Christian? If you sometimes feel you're not good enough, then you're not alone. We can all feel that, and for different reasons. Invariably, when talking about our prayer life, we can feel we are lacking. We hear of those who it comes naturally to. The Zoom meeting is drawing to a close and it is time for prayers. People take it in turn to pray, but you just can't find the words. The Bible study class where you wonder, how do these people know so much? You read of the social action list from your church operating a food bank to help the poor. You regret your impatience with a friend. Outside the house of the high priest, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Woman, I don't know him. Man, I am not. Man, I don't know what you're talking about, Peter said when asked if he knew Jesus. Was this a one-off for Peter, a particularly bad day? Peter's behaviour on this day was preceded by many events showing his vulnerability as a human being. Get behind me, Satan. You're a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. This Jesus said to Peter after he rebuked Jesus for saying he was to die in Jerusalem and be raised 3 days later. And ultimately, where was Peter when Jesus died on the cross? Where was Peter when the tomb was discovered empty? Was Peter good enough? We're all different, and that is how God made us. We all bring different gifts to life and the church. We are a mixture of strengths and weaknesses. You may lack theological knowledge, but your prayer life may rock, and vice versa. You may not have set the social action project up, but you found time to talk to a lonely neighbour. You may ask, well, what about my sins? I try not to, but it just happens all the time. We all sin, and we are forgiven for them by a gracious God. Our job is perhaps to try not to sin, but can anyone do that completely? What about that fleeting, uncomplimentary thought about an acquaintance? Yes, thoughts are included. We are all on a journey, a fabulous journey, with the love of God and love in our fellowship. We have the Holy Spirit to guide us. We perhaps need to learn to forgive and to love ourselves. How can we love others without loving ourselves? Jesus says to worship God with all our hearts and love our neighbours as ourselves. Unless we love ourselves, we cannot love our neighbours. Most of us are self-critical, and that is part of our makeup. We see in ourselves what we want to see. We believe ourselves to be what we believe others think of us, not as we are. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said. You know that I love you. Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." None of us are in fact good enough, yet we're all good enough. Jesus Christ's death on the cross made us all good enough. Peter was good enough, and so are we. Amen.